Good morning to everybody, and welcome to another lesson where we will be learning some Spanish, some basic Spanish, and the main goal of all these lessons is to review everything we've been practicing in our lessons, in our face-to-face lessons, and to help those of you who couldn't attend the lessons. So far, we've been working with a number of things, and the last thing that we saw was the verb ser. That was our first verb, and the verb ser means to be. Today, I'd like to move on a little bit, and we are going to have a look at a new verb. The new verb is going to be the verb tener, and that verb means to have. But we use it for a few more things that you use it in English. So without further ado, let's go. Let me share my screen and I will show you how the verb works. Well, I believe you are seeing my whiteboard at the moment. And first of all, we need to know how to conjugate the verb tener. And the verb tener, its original form, it's like this, tener. But then, like always, we need to draw the chart where we will have the different forms of tener. We will have 6 forms, and every box will be devoted to one subject, to one person speaking. For example, the first box, it's devoted to yo, which means I. The second box is going to be devoted to a tú, that means you. The next one has several subjects within it, and this box is devoted to él, that means he. It's also devoted to a she, to a ella, that means she, and it's also devoted to a usted, that is a polite you. Then we have the top right box, that is nosotros or nosotras, and that means we. And this one is for vosotros or vosotras, and that means a you plural, a you all. And finally, we have the bottom right box that is for ellos, which means they, masculine. We have ellas, that's a they, this time feminine. And we also have ustedes. That is a very polite you all, you plural. Okay, these are just the different subjects that we can have. Let's go now for the verb. Let's go to conjugate this verb, to modify this verb so it matches with those different subjects. Well, we have yo tengo, I have. Tú tienes, you have. Él o ella o usted tiene. He has, she has, or a you have, very polite. Nosotros o nosotras tenemos, we have. Vosotros o vosotras tenéis, you all have, you plural people have. And finally, ellos, ellas o ustedes tienen. So yo tengo, tú tienes, él tiene, ella tiene, usted tiene, nosotros o nosotras tenemos, vosotros o vosotras tenéis, and ellos o ellas o ustedes tienen. Okay, this is how we conjugate the verb tener, which means to have. Then now we could focus on the different uses, the different things that we say using the verb tener in Spanish. And basically we will have 4 different uses. We have the first use, that is to talk about possession. That's the same use in English. It's to talk about whatever you have. So you can say things like, yo tengo una bicicleta. I have a bicycle. O mi madre tiene 2 hermanos. My mother has 2 brothers. O yo tengo una casa grande. I have a big house. So I'm talking about whatever I have. It can be a negative sentence as well. Yo no tengo una casa grande. I don't have a big house. Have you noticed that we place that no before the verb? That's always going to be like that. Any verb to make the negative sentence is always going to be. It was like that for the verb ser, remember? And it will be for any verb. That's the way we do the negative. Vale? So we are talking about whatever we have, whatever we possess. So that's one of the main uses of the verb tener. But there are more uses in Spanish. For example, we also use it to talk about age. And I know this can be shocking because you use the verb to be. How old are you? I am so many years old. But in Spanish, what we will always ask is ¿cuántos años? And then whether. Or we can also ask ¿qué edad? What age? And now whether. And after those 2 structures, the verb tener will always follow. For example, I'm going to ask you, how old are you? ¿Cuántos años tienes tú? How old are you? Imagine I'm going to ask about a she. ¿Cuántos años tiene ella? How old is she? ¿Cuántos años tenéis vosotros? How old are you all? You plural people. How old are they? ¿Cuántos años tienen ellos? So I'm just using different forms of tener because I'm asking about a he, a she, a they. But it's always ¿cuántos años? If I prefer to use the other question, that's okay. ¿Qué edad tienes tú? What age are you? ¿Qué edad tiene tu hermano? How old is your brother? But the important thing you need to remember is that tener. It's the verb that we use to ask about the age. How do we answer? Easy peasy. In English, you always answer saying I am. Well, in Spanish, we will say I have, you have, he has. So if you want to say, for example, in my case, I'm 41. Yo tengo 41 años. I am 41 years old. Mi mujer tiene 44 años. My wife is 44 years old. Mi hermano tiene 30 años. My brother is 30 years old. Mi hija. Okay, I'm going to talk about my neighbors now, this time. Mis vecinos tienen 60 y 62 años. My neighbors are 60 and 62 because there are two neighbors, it's a couple. So it's always with the verb tener. So that's something important to remember. Never use the verb to be for the age, always the verb to have. More uses. We also use the verb to have to talk about duty or obligation. I believe in English you use this, have to. You say things like, I have to buy milk. I have to go to the supermarket. I have to whatever. And that is something that you need to do. You have to do. It's like we use the verb to have for that as well. But the way we do it is using the verb tener followed by que and then followed by another verb in its original form, in the infinitive. So no changes. So this tener needs to be modified, of course, but the second one won't be changed at all. So for example, imagine I want to say, I have to eat less fat, which is true, by the way. ¿Vale? I use the I, yo, and now what's the form of the verb tener that goes with yo? Tengo. And then I cannot forget to use que. And now the verb eat. But the verb eat without modifying it, without changing it at all. The verb eat is the verb comer. So yo tengo que comer. I have to eat menos grasa. I have to eat less fat. Or for example, my daughter has to study more. For example, mi hija, and because mi hija, it's a third person, single, it's a she. So it's mi hija tiene que estudiar más. My daughter has to study more. So that's one of the uses of the verb tener, to talk about duty. You can even ask with it, do you have to train today? Remember, we don't have do or das in Spanish. So we will say, yes, you have to train today. So, tú tienes que, and now the verb to train. Entrenar hoy. Do you have to train today? Vale. So that's another use of the verb tener. And finally, we have another use that is expressions. There is a certain number of expressions that we simply say different. We don't say them like you do. We say them with the verb tener rather than with other verbs that you use in English. For example, in English you say, I am hungry. But we wouldn't say that. We would say, I have hunger. Yo tengo hambre. Or, for example, in English you would say, she is hot. She is hot. In Spanish we would say, she has heat. Ella tiene calor. And there are many expressions like that that we say differently. And that's something that we will work with in one separate lesson. We will devote one lesson only for that. So I'll give you like a long list of expressions that work differently and we will practice with them. But I only wanted you to know that there are some expressions that are different, that are said with tener rather than with other verbs that you use in English. Okay, so this is the verb tener. And now, along with the verb ser that we saw, we have two verbs. So the idea is that we practice with tener, we do some exercises with tener, and we start using tener. And at some point, we mix tener with ser, which is something that I'm going to do in another video, another practice video, where I will just translate sentences from English to Spanish using probably at first just tener, but then little by little I will introduce ser and we will mix both. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video and I will see you very soon. Take care. Bye bye.